Think about two apartments for a second. Same city, same street, almost identical rent. The first one belongs to someone making around $95,000 a year. When you walk in, it looks impressive at first glance. A huge 7.5-inch TV dominates the living room. There's a leather couch that cost thousands. The kitchen is filled with appliances, many of them barely touched, some still in their packaging. The closet is packed tight with clothes, a lot of them never worn. There's even a spare room, but it's not really a room anymore, it's just storage for things that haven't been used in years. But here's what you don't see immediately. Every time this person checks their bank account, there's stress. They're living close to the edge, a couple of missed paychecks, and everything starts falling apart. Now picture the second apartment. This person earns about $52,000 a year. You walk in, and the difference is subtle but powerful. There's space. Nothing feels excessive. The couch is simple. The TV is reasonable. The kitchen only has what's actually used. The closet holds clothes that get worn regularly. The spare room is exactly what it should be, a functional bedroom. And when this person looks at their bank account, there's no tension. They have savings that can carry them for over a year. Every month, part of their income goes straight into investments without fail. Same environment. Completely different outcomes. The interesting part is this. It's not really about how much they earn. It's about how they relate to what they own. The first person didn't wake up one day and decide to be reckless. There's no gambling problem, no extreme habits. They just kept adding things little by little until their lifestyle quietly consumed their entire income. The second person made a different discovery. They realized that having fewer things doesn't mean sacrificing quality of life. In fact, it often improves it. Because when you're intentional about what you own, you create space not just physically, but financially. And that space changes everything. So, in this video, I'm going to break down the principles that separate people who always seem to have money from those who don't, no matter how much they make. This isn't about cutting back for the sake of it. It's about understanding something most people overlook. Nothing you own is ever a one-time expense. Every item has a visible cost and a hidden one. The visible cost is obvious. It's what you pay up front. The hidden cost is where things get interesting. Because once you own something, it starts demanding resources. Space in your home, time to maintain it, attention to manage it, and money that could have been used somewhere else. Take something simple like a treadmill. It might seem like a one-time purchase, but it takes up space, and space isn't free. In most cities, every square foot of your home has a cost attached to it. That treadmill might quietly be costing you hundreds every year just by existing in your space. Then there's upkeep, and beyond that, the mental weight. Every item you own requires a little bit of your attention, whether you notice it or not. And finally, the biggest cost of all, what you gave up to own it. Money spent on things is money that isn't growing, that isn't working for you. Over time, those trade-offs become massive. When you start looking at your purchases this way, something shifts. You realize that the real price of most things is much higher than what's printed on the tag. And once you see that clearly, your decisions start to change. My name is Annie, and I spend a lot of time thinking about money and how to level up financially. Once you understand that every possession has a hidden cost, the next step becomes obvious. You need a better way to decide what's actually worth buying. That's where the first principle comes in. Before you buy anything that isn't essential, ask yourself a simple question. How often will I really use this? Not the optimistic version, the honest one. Then take the price and divide it by that number. What you get is the real value of that item, its cost per use. And this is where things start to get uncomfortable. Because a lot of purchases that feel reasonable suddenly look ridiculous. That expensive kitchen gadget you think you'll use sometimes? If it ends up being used twice in a year, it becomes one of the most overpriced tools you own. On the other hand, something you use every day, even if it costs more up front, often turns out to be a better deal over time. This way of thinking cuts through emotions, trends, and marketing. It replaces, "I want this," with, "Does this actually make sense?" And that shift alone can save you a surprising amount of money. Now let's go deeper. Look around your space for a moment. Almost everything you see was bought at some point because it felt like a good idea. But here's a better question than, was this a good purchase? Ask yourself, if this disappeared today, would I go out and buy it again? That one question reveals a lot. Because for most items, the answer is no. Not because they're broken, not because they're useless, but because they don't actually matter anymore. They're just there. And that's the problem. When things stay in your life without serving a purpose, they don't just take up space physically. They take up energy. They demand attention. They make your environment heavier than it needs to be. And the strange part is, most people don't notice this happening. They just slowly adapt to it, until their space feels cluttered. Their finances feel tight. Now, there's another pattern that quietly drains money, even for people who earn a lot. Upgrading things that already work. This one is easy to justify. A newer phone comes out. It's slightly better, a little faster. The camera improves just enough to make you think it's worth it. Your current one still works perfectly, but suddenly, it feels outdated. Same thing with cars, furniture, electronics. Nothing is broken, but everything feels replaceable, and that feeling is expensive. Because replacing functional things doesn't improve your life in any meaningful way, it just resets the cycle of spending. People who avoid this trap operate differently. They don't replace things because something newer exists. They replace things when they stop doing their job. That's it. It sounds simple, but over time, this one habit creates a massive difference. Because instead of constantly restarting expenses, they stretch the value of what they already own. And that gap, that space between earning and spending, starts to grow. Now here's where behavior becomes more important than intention. Most people know they should save. The problem is, knowing isn't enough. Because when spending is easy, it usually wins. That's why the environment matters so much. If buying something takes 2 clicks, but saving requires effort, guess which one happens more often? So the strategy isn't to rely on discipline, it's to change the setup. Make spending slightly inconvenient, remove saved payment details, add a delay before purchases, reduce exposure to things that trigger buying. At the same time, make saving automatic. Set it up so money moves before you even see it. Treat it like a fixed obligation, not something optional. Once that system is in place, everything becomes easier. Because now your default behavior works in your favor instead of against you. And that's the real goal, not perfection, but alignment. Now let's talk about awareness. Most people don't actually know how much they own. They have a rough idea, but it's usually wrong. If you actually counted everything in certain categories, clothes, shoes, kitchen tools, you'd probably be surprised. And that surprise matters. Because when you see the real number, your perspective shifts. Another shift that makes a big difference is this. Not everything needs to be owned. A lot of things only feel necessary in the moment. There's excitement, curiosity, a sense that this might become a new interest. But in reality, many of those interests fade quickly. And when you buy first, you're committing before you even know if it's real. A smarter approach is to test first. Try things without owning them. Rent, borrow, experiment. If the interest sticks, then it might be worth investing in. If it doesn't, you've saved yourself money, space, and future clutter. This approach keeps your life flexible. Instead of being weighed down by past decisions, you stay open to change. And that flexibility has value. Because every major purchase doesn't just cost money, it often creates more costs around it. One thing leads to another. You buy something, and suddenly it needs accessories, maintenance, upgrades, storage. What looked like a single decision turns into a chain of expenses. Understanding this ahead of time changes how you evaluate big purchases. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "What comes with this?" That question alone prevents a lot of financial strain. Now let's zoom out. One of the biggest reasons people struggle financially, even with good income, is that they never define what enough looks like. So as they earn more, they spend more. Not because they have to, but because their standards keep shifting. What once felt like a luxury becomes normal. Then it becomes expected. And the cycle continues. Without a clear definition of enough, there's no finish line. You just keep running. But once you decide what's actually sufficient for you, everything changes. Because now, extra income has a purpose. It doesn't get absorbed into lifestyle, it builds something. It creates security, options, freedom. And that leads to a different way of thinking about wealth. Not as what you own, but as what you can choose. Can you step away when needed? Can you take risks? Can you make decisions without being forced by money? That's real wealth. And it comes from having space between your income and your expenses. The larger that space, the more control you have over your life. Everything else is just appearance. And once you see that clearly, your priorities shift naturally. You stop chasing more and start building better.